No, go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying, we see in the spiritual side, on the negative, that like spirits attract. Like in a room, you could have someone with a homosexual spirit on them be attracted to someone else without even making any verbal,
Right. Right.
communication. Like spirits attract, we know that. So how much more can we as Christians who are filled with the Holy Spirit expect that God will connect us, the Holy Spirit will connect us to those that need what we have to say? We should be bold and with anticipation.
But the other side of that is, and thank you for that comment, the Lord will connect us with, and He will give us opportunities where our personality is what they need to be encountered.
Right.
But also we've got to watch for if we can tell that the approach that we usually do is not the kind that's going to win that person, then we have to back off. Okay, we have to do that. And so we need to be willing to do what God asks us to do when we're put in the spot. And we need to be willing to step back if it's not our time or place at that time. So Peter's confrontational approach, and then we have Paul's intellectual approach. I know some people that will never be won by Peter's approach, but they will be won by Paul's intellectual approach. And the intellectuals, believe me, there's intellectuals out there. They're really smart and they're really thinkers. And if you're not one of the, you may be smart, but if you're not one of those real thinkers that can cause them to think about, in an intelligent way, then, leave them for those kind of people. You might be able to just show them love. You might be able to minister to them in your neighborhood or wherever. Of course you will. You can show them love. You can minister to them and show them light, the light of the gospel in so many ways, but you may not be able to one that can get through to them in other ways. Your love and the light in you can get through to them, and give them a good, a good, what's a good what?
Representation.
Yeah, representation. Thank you, of the Lord, and that's worth a lot. But for instance, we know when Paul went to Athens, and it listed here, from Acts chapter 17. There he was with all those intellectual Greeks, and he was there in the city center Mars Hill, where anybody that had a new theory or a new thing to share, a new philosophy, whatever, they got up on there on the little podium thing at Mars Hill, and people would gather, and then they would expound. That's where Paul was in Acts 17. And he was waiting on the other disciples to join, not the disciples, but the ones traveling with him. He was waiting on them to get there, and so he was waiting. And God, through the Holy Spirit, gave him this whole discourse to share with those in Athens, those Athenians. And they were moved, and they said, we want to hear more on this. And many of them came back and listened again, and many of them became believers. Not all of them, but many of them did, And that's when he gave his famous speech about to the unknown God, because they had all these different gods, and then they had one that was to the unknown God. And so Paul's intellectual approach. One of the things that I wouldn't term myself as an intellectual. I'm more of I don't know what I am, but I'm relational, but I'm also, I'm a person like, I can do the Peter approach, I can do the Paul approach sometimes, and a lot of us are like that too. But I remember one time when my son asked me, when his father-in-law was seeking answers. He believed in God. He was like an agnostic. And he had been an alcoholic, gone through for years, been an alcoholic for years, a working, very productive alcoholic, okay? And he had gone through the 12-step program and, said the prayer to the higher being. And he had come from he'd been raised Catholic, but he was searching. He said, I just can't, I have a problem with Jesus being God's son. I just can't believe that. I can believe in a God and that he created everything, but Jesus, And so my son asked me, he wanted to get him something for Christmas, that part of his Christmas gift that would help him in this search. And he said, Mom, which book would you recommend, The Case for Christ or Mere Christianity? I said, oh, Mere Christianity, because I knew his father-in-law. We were together at these birthday parties and stuff for the family. And he said, are you sure? I said, I'm positive. I said, The Case for Christ is a good book, but it's not for intellectuals. I said, Mere Christianity. I said, C.S. Lewis was an atheist. He was an atheist, and he was a very, very intelligent, highly educated person. And in his early 40s, he began to realize there was a God, and thought it through and thought it through and thought it through, and then began to realize there is a God, and it takes a step of faith. And that's what Mere Christianity is about, and his whole process of that. And anyway, so Rich took my advice. He got him that book for Christmas, and his father-in-law read the book and became a believer in Jesus Christ. Okay, so you've got to know, that's what I'm talking about. You've got to know who you're dealing with a lot of times. And like I said, don't try to be the one that wins everybody. But maybe you can just shed the light of the Lord in love to them. Okay, so Paul's intellectual approach. 3, the blind man's testimonial approach. Remember, we've been given our testimonies. And one of the greatest things that anybody can do, I don't care what personality they have, is you can always share your personal testimony about what God did for you. And because it's what he did for you, it is not only personal, it is moving, and it is sincere, and the honesty of it comes through. The realism of it comes through, okay? 4, Matthew's interpersonal approach, which we've already talked about at length, where Matthew, had the saints and the sinners together at his house and invited Jesus to come. Okay, throw a Matthew party, have a barbecue, a Matthew barbecue, where you have a mixed crowd, and let God pair people together and let have a good time and minister to people in that way. 5, the Samaritan woman's invitational approach. Remember when the Lord stopped at the well of Samaria there, and the woman was there drawing water, and he began to talk to her, and he began to tell her things about her life that a stranger would not know. And then she realized, after he told her, that he was the Messiah, the real Messiah that they'd been looking for. And she ran back into town, and she told everybody, look, you've got to come and hear this man. You've got to come and hear him. He's the Messiah, the one we've been looking for. And so she gathered this whole crowd of people to hear Jesus. And he stayed there for 2 or 3 days, giving the gospel to the Samaritans, and many of them became believers. So, is it a bad thing to invite someone to church and to hear the gospel? No. But build the relationship first. That's all we're talking about. Maybe your greatest approach is inviting someone to a gospel concert, or a gospel play, or going to the movie with their family coming over to see, like, Heaven is for Real movie with you, and you have snacks and stuff or whatever. So the invitational approach, there's nothing wrong with it. What's wrong with it is if all we do is just invite people here and there and we never build relationship. Okay, 6, Dorcas's service approach. In the book of Acts, we read about a lady named Dorcas, and she performed acts of service for people. Okay, what are some of the acts of service that you might be able to do, that just for your neighbors, for someone at the beauty shop, at the dry cleaners, at the gas station, whatever? You just get to know them, and you just begin to love on them and give them and help them and, minister to them without any ulterior motive. And because any seed that we sow is going, and God is going to bless it, and it will be very productive. So the bottom line is, be yourself. The most important thing to know is that most contagious Christians are those who've learned to work within the design that God has given them. They identify approaches that work for them, and then they develop and deploy them to advance the kingdom. Okay? And we can also team up with other Christians who have different styles. We can team up and reach numbers of people, in different ways. Okay. Let's continue on into section 4. We're trying to finish the book tonight and have our testimonies as well. Starting spiritual conversations. Well, I don't know if some of you read the illustration he gave here about the cab driver. I just want to tell it quickly. It's so, this is a totally, you can tell Bill Hybels is the Peter direct approach guy. Okay. So he and his wife and family were on vacation, and they were in a southern U.S. city, and they were taking a cab to their hotel. And anyway, he saw that this taxi driver was not the picture in the taxi cab was not the same guy that was driving this cab. And he was thinking, is this guy even on the up and up? And is he really going to take us to our hotel? So he asked him, why are you driving this taxi? Because that's not your picture. And the guy answers, oh, this taxi belongs to a friend of mine. And Bill Hybels is thinking, yeah, that's what they all say. So he said, I decided to check him out further. I tapped on the time meter and said, are you sure this thing is working right? And he said, as a matter of fact, it's 10% off. And so he said, I'm thinking, well, I said to him, it's Christmas time. I'll bet it's reading to my advantage, right? And he says, right away, he shot back, oh, no, you'll have to pay me 10% more than what it's reading. So he said, I was really, amazed at the nerve that this guy had. Well, what was he already learning about this guy? His personality, exactly. First, he was illegally driving someone else's taxi, and now he was trying to con me. After talking with him a little more, I came to the conclusion that my initial impressions were correct. It was going to take a strong, unorthodox approach to get through to a guy like this. So I noticed his foreign accent, Bill says, and I said to him, I'm curious, what part of the world are you from? He responded by naming his home country, which was in the Middle East. So I said to him, based on where you're from, I'm guessing that you're a Muslim. Am I right? Yes, he said, as a matter of fact, you are. So Bill continued, so are you a devout Muslim? Is your faith something you take seriously? I mean, do you plan on going to paradise when you die? I mean, he just came right out there with it. So he said he sputtered and coughed a little and didn't seem to know quite what to say, so I went on. You see, I'm a serious Christian, and I've always wondered something that, well, maybe you could explain to me. Why do you follow the teachings of a dead guy? About then, he almost swerved off the road. It seemed pretty clear that I had gotten his full attention. He says, huh? What do you mean? Well, I said, I know you worship Allah and you believe that Muhammad is Allah's spokesman, but he's dead. In fact, we could fly over there right now and see his grave. So why would you follow a dead guy? Well, he seemed to be scrambling for words, so I added, the Bible teaches very clearly that Jesus Christ rose from the dead. My family and I follow someone who is actually alive today. So the taxi driver responded, does the Bible really say that Jesus rose from the dead? I tried to read a Bible once and I didn't see it in there. Bill says, well, somebody probably gave you one with some pages missing. I could get you one that has all the pages. You could read it for yourself. Trust me, it's in there. Jesus is resurrected, Muhammad is dead, and in my opinion, you really ought to think this over.
That's awesome.
When we arrived at the hotel, I was glad we had a few minutes to talk. I assured him that my purpose was not to question the sincerity of his faith. See, when you have a completely direct approach like that with a stranger, and you've really been confrontational, you don't want to leave them thinking that you were just trying to beat them at the game and you just wanted to be the winning opponent. You can't leave with that kind of attitude. So he's talking to him when they get to the hotel, that my purpose was not to question the sincerity of his faith, or for that matter, the idea that Muhammad genuinely believed in what he taught. Before we parted, I challenged him with the fact that we couldn't both be right. He says, he made a good point. He says to him, you know what? We both can't be right. 5 seconds after each of us dies, we're both going to find out who believed the truth. And I'm betting my eternity on the one who came back from the dead. So if nothing else happened, it caused this taxi driver to begin to delve into and look for the truth. At least that seed was planted, and some kind of different approach might not have got this guy's attention. Do you see that? But the thing that I see most with some of these, not everybody, but the people that have the confrontational approach, we have to be careful that we don't leave it like a slam dunk and we leave these people in the dust. We can't do that, okay? There has to be, you have to make sure that they know that you really care about them and that you're not trying to just win, have another notch on your belt or whatever and put them down. And so his daughter said to him later, so what was that? Is that what you call evangelism? She said that to her dad. So regardless of the individual styles, we've got to be alert and looking for opportunities to talk to people about Christ. And he explained to his daughter later, he says, it was the way that fit me. And as he explained to her later, it was the one that seemed appropriate for the taxi driver given his character and personality. He says, I don't think anything other than a strong, straightforward approach would have gotten his attention. And that's probably true. Okay? All right? And another part of our formula is CC, clear communication. Okay, what if we get familiar and comfortable with our approach and our personality? We've also got to talk about our faith, putting spiritual concepts into plain, everyday words, okay, that people can understand and that they can wrap their heads around. Before we go into the details on how we can start spiritual conversations, he says, I want to caution us on 2 things. First, only a limited number of the examples I'm about to describe will actually fit you. Okay, let's say that again. Only a limited number of the examples that we're about to describe will actually fit us. So, how you raise topics of faith will depend on your personality, your setting, the subject matter you tend to talk to people about, and your own particular style of evangelism. So we got to remember that. Secondly, before you'll be able to initiate these kinds of discussions, you must start with the heartfelt assurance that not only is your life better now than it was before you knew God, but the lives of the others will be better too. Amen. Okay? We've got to have the heartfelt assurance that my life is completely changed. It's been so much better, and that's what I want for this other person. But I'm not going to shove it down their throat, okay? And I'm not going to, try to whip it all together in one setting. Usually that doesn't happen. Every once in a while it does. Okay, so what are some of the methods here? Number 1, the direct method. Okay, just like we learned about the taxi driver. This approach, the direct method, is redirecting conversations just like it says. It doesn't wait for opportunities to avail themselves, it creates them. The direct approach creates opportunity, just like he did with the taxi driver. That was the direct approach where you don't even have to, you don't even warm up to it. You don't even slide it in over here or, whatever. Nope. You just, you seize the moment, you go for it and direct. One of the direct approach lines he gives here is, listen to this. If you'd ever like to know the difference between religion and Christianity, let me know. I'd be happy to talk to you about it. There's a big difference between religion and Christianity. Religion, which he talks about later, is about keeping rules and regulations and trying to work your way to heaven. Christianity is about a relationship with God through Jesus Christ. Completely different. Okay? So one of those lines is, if you'd ever like to know the difference between religion and Christianity, let me know. I'd be happy to talk to you about it.
You said religion is rules.
It's rules and trying to work your way into heaven. That's religion. Christianity is a relationship with God through Jesus Christ. It's a relationship. Okay, and it's a covenant. It's a covenant relationship. Religion is just, trying to keep a bunch of rules. It has no relationship to it. Okay, here are some other direct conversation starters. Here's a few other direct conversation starters. I'm curious, do you ever think about spiritual matters? That's just diving right into it. Here's another one. Who, in your opinion, was Jesus Christ? What's your spiritual background? Were you taught a particular religious perspective as you grew up? Okay, that's diving right in. Here's another one. Do you ever wonder what happens to us when we die? A lot of people are wondering that today. What do you think a real Christian is? Where are you heading in your spiritual journey? Or where are you in your spiritual journey? You could even put it that way. Okay, these are some direct approaches. There's a number of other openers like that. Okay, now let's look at the indirect method. That was the direct method. Let's look at the indirect method. And he tells about a time when Mark and Heidi were in line in a well-known restaurant in New Orleans. It was a well-known one, so there were people waiting, hours, sometimes a couple hours to get in for a table. And they were in this long line, and there were a bunch of people around them. And there was a guy right behind him, and a stranger, and Mark began to talk to him and transition the conversation by saying, since you're a lighting expert, because he had found out this man was a lighting expert, maybe you can explain something to me about some of the lights we use for a special concert at our church. And at first the man wasn't too interested, but he kind of answered him, and they got in this conversation, and Mark told him what kind of lights they had just bought for the church. They're the kinds that move on their own, and they have different colors, and they do these different, a lot of churches have those now, but they were one of the first churches to have them. And this man says, he said, those are called Very lights, and they're computer controlled by highly trained technicians. I've never seen them run before. Did you say you had one of those in your church? And Mark replied, no, we have about 30 of them. And he told him how they were mounted and all that. So the man was completely fascinated. He says, that's incredible. What kind of a church do you go to? And so then they began to have this long conversation about these lights and everything. And then the man gave Mark his card. And he said, he wanted him to mail him a videotape of the program he described. And it all started with a simple conversation. Okay? All right, that's the indirect method. And that's just as good if you're reaching people for the right reason and the right motive, okay? And there's all kinds of ways you can use this indirect method in your business associates, with your business associates, with relocations when you have to move and relocate, with hobbies and spare time. Nature, there's people that have nature in common. Music, sports, shared struggles, holidays, okay, all those and many more that, the indirect approach can work. 3, the invitational method, which we've already talked about some of these in a different way. We're talking about the method of it now. Inviting friends to these concerts, plays, movies, church services, or social gatherings, and it really opens up their world. Okay, here are some overriding principles we have to look at with every method and every approach. Number 1, pray hard. We have to depend on the leading of the Holy Spirit, like Melanie brought up. It's so important. The Holy Spirit will connect us with people. And the more that we pray and put this before the Lord, and it does, I mean, there are times when we have seasons of prayer where we have longer periods of praying, an extended prayer time. But we don't have extended prayer times all the time, 24/7, all right? But we can pray throughout the day. We can lift our heart to the Lord throughout the day. We can say, Lord, direct me. Show me where you would have me to go and not go. Have you ever, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but I've been, one time, just as an example, one time I was, I had my plans to do this or that day, and I was getting in the car to go to the grocery store, and I was going to make 2 or 3 other stops, and I just felt in my spirit, don't go. Don't do this today. And the Lord told me, stay home and do this, da-da-da-da-da. And so I did. I just obeyed what the Lord said. Why? When you think it was just, I might have been an accident. It may not have been anything like that. It may have just been I would be more productive that day staying home and doing these other things and just obeying the Lord in that way. So we got to pray and follow the leading of the Holy Spirit in all that we do, especially in our, with people, and asking God to send us into the real harvest field, wherever it is, wherever we are. 2, we need to talk to people individually. Sometimes you have to draw them away from the crowd. Sometimes you have to say, can we meet for a cup of coffee? Or could I just, I need to talk with you privately for a moment and get to know them. I'm not talking about necessarily just giving them the gospel, but I mean, when we're dealing, a lot of times when they're around other people and the peer pressure is there, it can throw the whole thing off. And so, and of course we know when Jesus had to make people leave the room or whatever because of the unbelief and the mocking and that kind of stuff. So sometimes it's better just to, talk to people individually or get to know them individually, and we have to be aware of that. We can also raise people's curiosity, like Jesus did with the woman at the well. Boy, talk about raising curiosity there and getting her attention. 4, rely on reciprocal reflexes. Okay? And like he says here, that's a fancy way of saying that if you want to tell someone about your own interests or beliefs, start by asking them about theirs. Ask them, what do you like to do? Or how do you spend your spare time? Or, ask them about theirs first. 5, seize split-second opportunities. And that's what Mark did with the taxi driver. Sometimes you'll only have a split-second opportunity. And so seize those. Be ready for them. Okay, we've all got 2 doors we can go through. One is safe and familiar and uneventful. The other sometimes is risky, uncharted, and full of spiritual potential. Which door will you choose? That's when we seize the split-second opportunities. Okay, another thing we have to think about, and one of the overriding principles is don't underestimate their degree of interest. Don't underestimate it. There's people out there searching for answers. Okay, and we have them. It's all in the approach and following the Holy Spirit at that point in their life and where they are, and relying on the Holy Spirit for that. Okay, this book is just a great book. Some of these illustrations are just wonderful and really helpful. And this is another one of my favorite examples here in the beginning of chapter 11, when he and Lynn, his wife, were on a sailing trip, because that's their hobby. That's his hobby, is a sailboat, and he has a lot of these encounters through his sailing trips. And after they anchored in the harbor for a night, we got into a conversation with some people who invited us to come to their boat later to spend some time socializing with them and a few of their friends. And they accepted the invitation, and that evening they got into their dinghy and motored over to their yacht. They were very hospitable, and we enjoyed getting to know them, he said. but it soon became clear that they were not believers. None of these people were believers. So here's Bill Hybels and his wife, who are pastors, and they're with this group of non-believers. But when in the course of our discussion they asked what I did for a living, none of them seemed taken aback by the fact that I was a pastor of a church. They were just cordial and friendly, and we had a good time. So see, this opportunity that we're about to discuss would have never happened if they'd have come into that group and just started preaching and quoting scriptures. It wouldn't have happened. So they continued, having a good time and conversation. Then it was time to leave, and Lynn had already climbed down the ladder into the dinghy, and I was halfway down myself when one of the people who had invited us aboard said, "Say, Bill, before you leave, can you answer a question? I've always wanted to ask a Christian what it means to become one. Can you tell all of us?" He's on the ladder, putting on his shoes, and she's already down in the dinghy. There I was, 1 foot in the dinghy, one hand on the boat's railing, looking up at all of these people who were standing there holding their pina coladas and waiting to see what I'd say. I knew I had their undivided attention for about 45 seconds to summarize what it means to become a real Christian. Okay, one reason he put this example on here is he says, okay, let's do a freeze frame. So I can ask you a question. If you'd been in my place, how would you have responded? Would you have been ready to give a clear and succinct response to such an important question and in about 45 seconds or a minute at the most? Okay? And the Bible tells us to always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you for the reason for the hope that you have. And he says, let's think about this for a minute. First, I want us to make certain we understand the gospel message for ourselves. Do we really understand the gospel message, and what is the central point? Second, I want to be sure we know how to illustrate it for those we talk to, and especially when you only have a very limited amount of time. You don't have time to give your whole testimony. You don't have time to go through the 4 spiritual laws. You don't have time to go down the Romans road, okay? What would you say in 45 seconds? Okay? One of the things we've got to understand, he says, listen, before he tells you his answer, one of the things we have to understand is, do we understand God? There are many aspects of God's nature that we could study. He has a lot of wonderful characteristics that are relevant to evangelism. He's loving, he's holy, he's pure, he's just, you can't go into a whole dissertation about God in 45 seconds or a minute. He's a wonderful God. And then let's think about us. What about us? When God first created us, we were in spiritual death. When he first created man, man was created perfect, completely perfect. And then man sinned and fell into sin. What is real spiritual death? Spiritual death is separation from God. We have to understand that. A lot of people, when you say, what is spiritual death? They don't know. Oh, I don't know. Spiritual death is separation from God. Okay, if you're separated from God, where would you be? You'd be without God. Okay? So what is God and what is all around him? Is he life? Yes. Is he light? Yes. Is he love? Yes. Is he peace? God is peace. Yes. Okay. Is he a healer? Is he a savior? Yes. Is he a deliverer? Yes. Is he, the other one I was thinking of, is he a provider? Yes. Is he joy? Yes. Okay. And we could go on and on about the different attributes of God. Okay, if you're separated from God, you're separated from all that stuff. And isn't that the definition of hell? Hell has no light. It has no life. It has no peace. It has no fulfillment. It has no joy. It has no peace, no healing, no wholeness, nothing. Darkness. It's a place completely without God, where you're completely separated from him, and that's what makes it hell. These people have chosen to live their whole life and they don't want anything to do with God, and so they go to a place without God. And that is what hell is. So spiritual death is separation from God in a place called hell. And he said, sometimes I describe this condition as being morally bankrupt. You know, to people that don't understand, we're morally bankrupt with nothing in our account with which to pay off our debts. That's where we find ourselves. It's like being completely bankrupt and we can't pay our debts off. And then the third thing we must understand in all this is Christ. Jesus Christ is the one that came and died and paid the price in our place. He paid the debt that we couldn't pay. And the debt is paid in full. But he says, before we go to my last point here in us understanding clearly the gospel, one of the things that people bring up, because he's had an experience as a pastor and being personally evangelizing people. One of the things that he brings up is some people ask why any price had to be paid at all. Why couldn't God just forgive us and forget as we can? Well, some people can't. But and the other question they ask is why Christ had to pay a penalty at all. Why was there even a penalty that had to be paid? Okay. And of course we know that a law was broken, and he gives an illustration here, a good illustration of a car. He said, let's say that you have a vehicle and somebody rams into it and messes it up and it has to be repaired. And they say, I don't have the money or I don't have insurance to repair it. And you say, but somebody has to fix it. Somebody has to pay the price. And so then you say, okay, I'll forgive you your debt, and I'll go ahead and fix it. I'll pay the price, to fix this car. All right, so a price has to be paid for a damage that was done and a debt that was owed. And so the Lord saw that we were bankrupt and we couldn't pay it. So he says, okay, I'll take care of that. I'll pay it for you. And I forgive you, So we have to understand these things to make it clear when we're communicating to people. Christ willingly paid the price for us because he loves us. And he's saying, won't you trust me and follow me? Okay, and then it comes down to us. This is what we got to understand when we're communicating the gospel. It comes down to each individual. What are you going to do with the provision God made? What are you going to do with Jesus Christ, his son? What am I going to do with him? Are you going to trust him? Are you going to follow him? Are you going to accept the provision that was made and clear the slate and the debt be paid? So do we understand the concepts here that we're trying to get across to the people that we're communicating to? And I'm sorry I'm having to run through this so quickly, but that's why you need the book. And we can't make the decision for someone else. Each one of us has to make the decision for ourselves. But we also can't push it on them prematurely. Have you ever run into somebody that a decision was tried, or the gospel was pushed on them prematurely, and they are bitter about it and resentful? So as much as we want to, follow through on something and lead someone to the Lord, we can't push something prematurely because that's making it worse. One of the illustrations that makes the message clear is do versus done. And we brought this up a little bit earlier, but this explains it really well. First, we've got to realize the difference between religion and Christianity. Religion is spelled D-O, do, because it consists of the things people do to try to somehow gain God's favor and forgiveness. So religion is spelled D-O. That's one of the differences between religion and Christianity. But thankfully, Christianity is spelled differently. It's spelled D-O-N-E, done, which means that we could never do for ourselves what Christ has already done for us. Isn't that amazing? I think that's a very good way to put it. You know, do versus done. Religion is spelled D-O and Christianity is spelled D-O-N-E. It's been done. Christ did it for us. To become real Christians, we humbly receive God's gift of forgiveness and commit to following his leadership. When we do that, he adopts us into his family and begins to change us from the inside out. Okay, and then we have the bridge illustration. He said that so many times, he's done this illustration so many times in explaining the way of salvation to people when it got to that point. And he's drawn it on, paper napkins and whatever piece of paper he had. But you have your book there. You can see the illustration on a piece of paper. Us is on one side, God's on the other. Just, write the words us and God over there. And then you draw a barrier around each one. And then you put death at the bottom between God and us. Death is down here and we're headed toward death. But then we show that Jesus Christ came, and you put the cross there to bridge these two parts, us and God, and cross out death, because Jesus paid the price for every man to live and not to have to suffer death. And then you complete the illustration by showing how we can come to Christ across the bridge of his cross. The cross is the bridge, and we can walk across from our side that's going down to death to God's side, which is life. And this is one of the illustrations that we can show in a picture, in an illustration, how people can come to the Lord, and they see it, in terms like that. And even after he says, even after we do an illustration like this, or we talk to someone with the intellectual approach or whatever, still people need time to think about it. They need time to process it and think it over. We need to be able to give them that freedom. If we rush into this or push it, then they'll back out of the process completely. And sometimes it takes a gradual process. Another way to clearly communicate the gospel is through the Romans road. And that's the Romans road to salvation. Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Romans 6:23, for the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life in Christ Jesus our Lord. Romans 10:13, everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. That's all right there in the book of Romans. Romans 3:23, 6:23, and Romans 10:13. And sometimes that's the best way to, for them to understand. Another one is the baseball illustration. How many of you are familiar with baseball very much, or your family, and you talk to someone about the All-Universal Hall of Fame? The All-Universal Hall of Fame that we can have our name written in. So first, the person must play consistently for at least 5 consecutive years. Okay, a baseball player that plays consecutively for 5 consecutive years. Second, they must play error-free ball, not have one error in all those 5 years. That's right, no errors. And third, they must bat 1,000. That means they must get a hit every time up without fail. Just to do those 3 things, and you're automatically ensured induction into the All-Universal Hall of Fame. Well, nobody can do that. And of course, the person you're talking to says, no one can do that. And you say, that's exactly right. That's what it's like trying to get to heaven on your own without Jesus Christ. Okay, so there's another illustration that can be used. The other one is the airplane illustration, or you can use any kind of transportation, a train, an airplane, a bus, a car. You can go to the airport. You can study about airplanes. You can go to a class. You can take flying lessons. You can go to a travel agency and get all the brochures and da-da-da-da. But until you get on the plane, you're not going to go anywhere. Okay? Until you actually make the decision and commit and climb aboard the airplane, you're not going to go anywhere. Well, see, that's another illustration that we can use. Another way to reach people, of course, is our personal story. But remember, in any of these approaches and methods and, in these tips, don't give a speech. Okay, you're not up preaching, or you're not up teaching. People want to talk with you, not be talked at by you. Okay, so we got to listen also. We got to listen. We got to let them open up to us. We got to, exactly. We got to give it in doses. Okay, if we give too much information at once, we can abort. It could abort the whole thing. It could, just cause them to, when they see us, start walking the other way. Most people merely want the Cliff Notes version, And then, of course, we've got to be bold. When we do know, when we've got that green light and we know we're supposed to say something or whatever, then that's when we lean on the strength and the wisdom of the Holy Spirit. And with love in our hearts, we take that step we're supposed to take. And God's right there backing us up. One of the, I don't know if he tells us later or if I've already passed it up, I don't remember, but one of the ladies who had that he gives an illustration here, who had a very gentle, quiet spirit, and she usually used the indirect approach, and he said she's won scores of people to the Lord through her personality and her indirect approach. So it's not always just the Peter confrontational or the Paul, intellectual approach that wins people. It's just us being us and being who we are, who God made us to be, and loving people, loving and caring about people. And God will lead us and He'll direct us. Okay, let me see what time it is. All right. It's 6:45. I'm running out of time. We've got to have our testimonies. We've got to be sure that we understand that there's a lot of misconceptions out there about God. People have way distorted images of God. Oh my goodness. They've had poor examples. They've had bad teaching. They've had natural fears. And sometimes we don't want to deal with it. We want to kind of sweep it under the rug and, let's just go to, I want to talk about something more important. No, you can't talk to them when they got this blockage there that's been put in their mind. You've got to begin to deal with that. We have to, there's all kinds of, he's got all kinds of tips in here on those kind of things. You got to do your homework. One of the things you got to do is you got to do your homework. One thing I do want to bring up is moral misgivings, or people that have something else going on in their heart and they're in their life and they're not living right and they're trying to hide it. I mean, after a while of dealing with people like that, no matter what you bring up, like they're in this conversation with you and they started it, or they bring up the question, or they're on the defensive, and so you're trying to answer their questions just innocently, and so then question after question and judgment after judgment, and finally 10 or 15 or 30 minutes later, they're still bringing up and nothing you say. All right, get a clue. Something else is going on in their life. There's something deeper. That's just a smoke screen over something else that they're not living right. They're trying to get you off the trail, and they're bringing up all this stuff. So remember that. One of the things you can do for people like that who are just an old-fashioned ordinary sin is give them a cost-benefit analysis if you can get that far. You can say, well, okay, what are the benefits of what you're doing? What are the benefits? What do you get out of this? Your alcoholism or your drug addiction or your pornographic lifestyle or whatever it might be, And they begin to say, like if they're an alcoholic, well, it tastes good. Okay. It's fun. Okay. My friends are into it too. Okay. What else? Takes them a minute, they're still thinking. Well, it helps me relax. Okay. All right. Well, let's look at the downside. What are the downside of what you're doing? And then you can bring up, do you ever end up saying things and doing things you regret later? Are your hangovers painful and uncomfortable? Does it ever cost you money? Not to mention time and energy. How about the eventual, liver disease that could happen? And the high probability of alcohol addiction. It can impair your ability to drive, and it risks not only property, but it also could risk somebody else's life. So you give them the pros, you let them tell you how great this is for them, and then you tell them the downside. Well, that gives them something to think about. And if you say it in the right way, humbly, without a chip on your shoulder, or whatever, then that can get through to them. So we've got to break the barriers with these people in those ways. Let's see. Where is I thought I marked it. The end of the story on when he was in the dinghy with the 45 seconds. Where is the rest of the story? On what page? I went over this today again. What he said. Okay, I'll look for it while we're doing our testimonies, and then I'll finish it up and tell you, what he said. Okay, and then he's got how to approach the line where they're ready to make commitments and what to do from there. Assessing their interest, their understanding, their readiness. If they're not ready, if they are ready, crossing the line, to be sure and relax, forget about word formulas, pray together, follow the leading of the Holy Spirit. I'm throwing that in. Pray aloud with them, or lead off the prayer, or turn it over to them, close the prayer, and then going beyond that. After you lead them to the Lord, celebrate with them, affirm their commitment, paint a realistic picture, like it's, you're going to have some, there'll be some tests. It's not all a bed of roses, but God is there to help you. You've got other people to help you. Explain steps for spiritual growth and about, prayer, Bible reading, relationships with other Christians, and about their relationships with non-Christians, and that kind of thing, and being in church and all that. All right, so those are things that he gives instruction on that you have in your book, and that are very important and good. All right, I would like for, let's see, who's going to be first? Let's see, there's Aaron, Taryn, and Alex tonight. Okay, who's going to be first to come up and give your personal testimony? Okay, all right, Taryn, come on up, and we're going to get you online here. Just give your name, and so you've got 5 to 7 minutes.
Okay.
All right?
Am I deducted if I go over, or how does that?
Well, I hope you don't go over because we're running out of time.
I don't think I will.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think I'll go over. It's kind of short.
Okay.
But just curious to know.
No, I'm not
Just gonna zap you with her.
No.
Taser.
So you're just ready when I am?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. So my name's Taryn, and my testimony is cool. I grew up in a Christian home, and my parents were pastors when I was a kid. So as far back as I could remember, my parents were pastors. My grandparents were also pastors. So I kind of grew up in that environment where it's just normal. Like, that's what it was. Like, that's who I am. Like, I'm a Christian kid. My family's Christian. That's just who I was. That's what I was around. And it was all just super normal. I remember being a kid, and you know how a lot of times the pastor's kids can sort of go onto like a rebellious like age and kind of rebel with the church and their parents and kind of go a completely different direction. Well, that was not me at all. I always had this sense of conviction that if I ever thought about doing something, immediately I was just convicted. I couldn't get myself to do it because I knew God. If I sin, I know that I could possibly go to hell if I died. It was almost like that fear of like, oh my gosh, if I sin and I get caught, or if I sin and I don't repent later, like that could be it for me. It was just this conviction that I always had. So I grew up with that, and in fact, progressing now, I still, I never did anything because I always had that sense of conviction over my life. And I think there's a scripture that talks about, if you train up your kids in the way that they should go, they're never going to abandon it. It's a proverb. And it's just true. You know what I mean? And usually people that stray who are raised in that home, they usually come back because they know God. You know what I mean? They're not going to run away forever. They know who God is. So that was me. I can't give a definite experience point where I accepted God because I had to have been like 5 years old, and it's just I've confessed with my mouth and believed in my heart probably over 100 times. You know what I mean? So I can't go back to the very first time. There's just no way. I can go back to the first time I spoke in tongues. I remember that pretty distinctly. I remember hearing about it as a kid, but didn't pay a lot of attention to it because I didn't really care. I didn't know what it was. It doesn't really matter if it happens, it happens. But I remember Tori, one of my friends, and I remember my mom telling me that, oh, your friend Tori, she spoke in tongues last night, and it was a big deal. I was like, oh, that's so cool. I had to have been 9 years old. And I remember hearing about that, and I didn't care about it until then because I just got super competitive. And I had to experience it as well. I had to know what that was. And so I remember that same night. I don't know if I told anyone this, but I remember that same night I waited till Evan was asleep, and I went into my bathroom, and because I was going to experience this, no matter what. I had been in there for over 2 hours praying to speak in tongues. I had to experience it, and it had to be over 2 hours. I remember it was just a long period of time. It was way late in the night, and I remember crying as 9, trying to experience this. And I remember being frustrated at God because I couldn't get it. I was like, why would you not let me experience this after going here for 2 whole hours? I was frustrated. It wasn't long, probably a week. After that, we all got together, and me and Tevin were a part of this thing called Master's Commissions, where we would travel to different churches and throw on human videos and do different dances and stuff for a certain song. So we did that, and we had a prayer/worship meeting, and our leaders were praying that we would receive. If anyone hasn't, come up. We're going to pray for you to experience speaking in tongues. So I went up, and that's the first time that I did, and I remember it distinctly. That day was incredible. I remember for the first time experiencing this gift. I remember going into my mom's office afterwards and speaking in tongues in her office and look what check this out, this is awesome. And I don't know if Tevin, if you remember that. I think that was the same time for you because you were there. And I remember we were speaking in tongues. I remember forgetting what it was to even talk in English anymore because I didn't want to. I never wanted to talk in English again. I just wanted to speak in this language because I felt so good. I felt so free, and it was just awesome. And then I think a lot of times when we've been able to speak in tongues for so long, not that it's a bad thing, but we can kind of take for granted oh yeah, it's just speaking in tongues. But I remember the first time, it was such an awesome thing. And to think now, people who, haven't, and then maybe for the first time, what that must feel like, to have God take over, for the first time. So I remember that. And I remember moving later on. I had to have been a sophomore in high school, junior in high school, moving to this one city in this my grandparents' church, and their youth group was not very special. I remember actually going and not wanting to be there because it was really boring. And I remember the youth pastor taking us to an event, and I remember that event. That's probably where I experienced the most I had of God at that time. And I went to this event. It was a Jesus Culture Conference. And I remember just feeling the fire of God like never before during that conference. I remember them taking us out on scavenger hunts to pray for people. And before that, we were praying that God would give us visions of people to pray for. I remember God giving me visions. I remember actually seeing them. And this was just one of those things where God just became so real. There's just no doubt in my mind. Like, no one could convince me that he wasn't. And from then on, my testimony is pretty simple. I've always followed God up to this point. I'm 22 now. That had to be 8 years ago. To this day, like, I'll just never abandon God. It's just one of those things. Like, there's nothing that's worth it that I could, go for that would be better than what I have, I think one thing, like, I also did an internship last year at the House Modesto. And I remember us going out and evangelizing, and it's always hard for me, and I'm still learning how to evangelize to the lost because I cannot relate in any way to like what they've gone through because I haven't. I've had a great home, and it's been awesome, and so it's kind of hard to get to their level where I can try to relate with them some way to try to evangelize. It's hard. I find it more enjoyable and easy for me to help people who already know God but are considering like giving up or quitting, because I've been there 50 times before, but I haven't. So I can personally tell you, this is how you can deal with this. That's where I think my strength comes in, is witnessing and loving on people, that know God, but not the way that I do, or maybe they've gone through something traumatic and they're considering quitting. No, don't quit. Like, I've been there. Let me show you in Scripture that deals with this or that, because I know a lot of Scripture, so it's easy for me to sit down with someone and to go through things. But for someone who doesn't know anything about God, that's tough. I'm still learning how to get good at that, I guess. But that's pretty much my personal experience. Couldn't give you the first time, but just,
Thank you.
Cool.
All right. Aaron or Alex, who's going to be next? Okay, Aaron, come on. Okay, now Aaron's coming. Okay, yeah. Okay, all right, Aaron, come on up and give your name and your testimony. Okay.
Oh, it didn't already start, did it? I'm scared.
Yeah, it's already on. All right.
I'm wearing a sweatshirt. I don't even look nice.
You're fine.
Hi, my name is Aaron Morin. That's all I have to give, right? That's my name. Okay, cool.
Social security number.
Oh, all right. Well, really trying to think of the best way to start this off. There's a lot of different things I guess I could talk about. I had, not that I ever came from a bad home. I came from a really good home, actually. My grandfather, for any of you who don't know, is Ken Morin. He's been a minister since before I was born. I think he's been in Patterson since before I was born. And so he's always taught me, always hammered in, live for Jesus, live for Jesus. I've listened to thousands of sermons. I love the guy, but for some reason, I don't know. I always, I was always a good kid. I went to Modesto Christian. I went to Modesto Christian preschool. I love God. I serve God. But that's where I'll start. About the time I turned 17, on January 19th of 2013, I think. No, 12, sorry. Just a few months later, my grandfather, by the name of Art Coburn, fell off a ladder in his backyard and broke several of his ribs on his right side. He was out trying to trim a branch in the rain, and he fell. Not thinking it was a huge deal, we didn't go and see him immediately. And when we did, he was in rough shape. He had a hard time breathing. He was about 75 years old. He was taking it rough, but they said, there's no reason anything will happen to you. You'll be just fine. You're going to live. Things progressively started to get worse. He stopped breathing as well. He ended up going into cardiac arrest and eventually lost all brain function. They had to put him on life support, and we went and saw him. That was the last time I ever saw him. And I had no idea I was getting ready to say goodbye to my grandfather at 17 years old. It was really hard. It was a very traumatic experience. And I remember seeing my grandmother, who was partially mentally ill, who she had no idea how she was going to continue on. He was her rock, her support. He literally took care of her, and she had no idea. And so I remember as we left the hospital that night, it was about mid-April, I remember sitting in the car thinking, God, how is this fair? He was the second most devout Christian I think I'd ever met in my life. He continuously went to church meetings, support groups for men, men's groups, led many men's groups. And I was like, God, of all people, how is it fair that he has to die a painful death and other people, worse off people get to live? And so I took that hard. I took that to heart, and I stopped praying. I stopped speaking to God. I stopped caring. I was like, I was angry. I was severely angry, and I thought, what kind of God is this that I've been taught about my whole life I felt he killed him. So then, in my anger, I started experimenting with things I shouldn't have, with drugs, with alcohol, with people I shouldn't have got involved with. And I did. And I'm not proud to say I did, but I did. And eventually, about a year later, when I was already 18, on October 31st, can't tell you quite what time it was, early in the morning sometime, I was still asleep, but I had a dream, and it was the most realistic dream I've ever had, still to date, still the most realistic, that I was walking down my stairs in my house, and I was stopped. Couldn't tell you why I stopped. Couldn't tell you. But I heard a voice speak to me out of nowhere, and it spoke to me the verse, Acts 16, verse 10. I woke up about 7 a.m. to get ready for school. Was taking a shower. Wasn't really thinking. I was like, did I hear that? Was that real? Okay. So I went into my room and turned on my phone and flipped through the internet, searched it, because I wouldn't read the Bible at that time. I didn't care. And I came across it, and the verse goes, after Paul had seen the vision, we left at once for Macedonia, concluding that God had called us to preach the gospel to them. And I thought, well, that's strange. What does that mean, So I was like, okay, whatever. That must have been. So I called up my grandfather, Ken Moore, and I was like, you know a lot about this stuff. What do you think that means? And he's like, let me get back to you. So he hung up on me, and he called me back a few hours later, maybe the next day. And he was like, you know what? I think you were called to preach the gospel. And I was like, okay, yeah, right. Yeah, old man, whatever you say. And he was like, I'm actually teaching a class on Acts right now as it goes. He's like, and we just finished getting through Acts verse 16. He's like, I don't think that's a coincidence. I think it is. I think you're crazy. So anyway, some time went through, and I kind of ignored it. I didn't, it sat in the back of my mind. But eventually, God really sat me down and dealt with me. I was like, I tried everything else I could do. I tried, to get my degree in English, be an English teacher. That wasn't working. I tried to work with children. That didn't work. No matter what I did, it inevitably failed. And so I finally had to come to the conclusion, maybe this is really what I have to do. Maybe this is what I'm supposed to do. So I sat down with my Bible one night, and I was like, okay, God, if you is really what you want me to do, give me a way to do it. And I just remember my mind being flooded with all these verses I didn't even know existed. I never read, I never heard. And as I flipped to them one after another, they all corresponded with different things that I needed, that I really needed. So I called my grandpa. I was like, okay, all right, maybe you're right. Maybe there's something to this that I just didn't see before. And so we got down to start talking, and he asked me if I was seriously serious about it. And I said, yeah, you know what, I think I am. I'm going to be really serious about it. So I ended up, he signed me up, helped me sign up for the Generations classes, and I've been here ever since. And it turns out, actually I've as I never thought it, we've actually had a couple former drug addicts move in, and I always seem getting run into drug addicts or ex-drug addicts, and I was sitting down with my mom one day, and I was like, why? Why do I always run into drug addicts? Why? She's like, maybe that's what you're supposed to do. She's like, maybe that's on purpose. She's like, you've been through it. You know what it's like. And I was like, wow, I never thought about it that way. So that's me. That's my testimony.
Okay, Alex, I'm going to ask you to come on up, please. Come on up. Okay, and give your name and then give your testimony.
Okay, I'm Alex Morse. I'm 20 years old. I did not start in a church family. My family only went to church for funerals and weddings. I live with my grandparents. When I was younger, my mother and father fought over custody for me for a long time. But I've always lived with my grandparents since I was young. I've always loved my grandparents. The schools always called them my father and mother. But so growing up, my grandparents made sure to follow the rules, always conduct yourself in an orderly manner, which I thank them to this day. But when I went to school, I was smart. I liked math. Always followed the rules. Elementary school, I was good times, had fun. Loved playing around. When I got to middle school and high school, that's when it became a bit more different. How you interact with fellow students drastically changes from elementary school, where everyone's loving and caring, and then you hit middle school, it just takes a drastic turn. So when I hit middle school, there was a lot of negative view for people who followed the rules. They would be insulted. Teachers pad, a lot of negative feedback. And then once I hit middle school, I was also constantly insulted for my size. I thought I looked adorable. But Grandma said so. Grandma always loved me. But it was just kids being kids. That's just how some people are, and it's understandable. But as I went through middle school and high school, it started getting to me. It just constant arrows coming at you. But I'd have to say during 7th grade, that's when things started looking up. A friend came up to me and he said, Alex, you know what? You lived in Salida your whole life, and there's a church that I go to. And he's like, we do a youth group on Wednesday. How about you go to that? I was like, oh, okay. I only live 3 streets down. It's walking distance. I'll be more than happy to give it a try. And so I started going. It was quite an interest. I was like, I've never been to a youth group before. They sang songs, sang music, which to me I was like, oh, okay, that's how we do it. Okay. I was a bit confused and concerned, but the pastor was the guy that got to me, because he was just like me. He was tall. I'm not tall, but he was just a funny guy, really just out there, outgoing, personable, and I've always talked to him. And so I went to the youth group for, I'd say, about a month, and this was a month before my graduation, so I was like, oh, okay, this is something. And so it was finally time to graduate middle school. We sat down at our stadium. They call their names, and I walk up to go get my diploma, because it's middle school, but they call it a diploma still. And you have to shake hands with people, the principal, superintendent. And my pastor was there because he was representing the Salida Rotary Club, which I thought was a pretty funny deal, which I liked, because I just love my pastor. And so that happened. And then I got to high school, and it got more criticism, because I didn't hang out with people. I tend to stay to myself and not public speaking. For lunches, I wouldn't hang out with people, I'd hang out with teachers. I even got several opportunities to teach math class. I thought that was fun. But I'd say sophomore, I've been going to this church for 4 years now. The youth group, I've been doing slides and sounds. And then finally, it was a morning prayer. Pastor Paul decided, okay, we're going to do morning prayer. You're going to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and we're going to pray and have a good time. And I said, okay, I could do that too, kind of early. But we would get together, sing, and just praise him. And I've been here for 4 years. I was there for 4 years, and I just started feeling loved because not many people showed it back then, or still do. It's still a crazy thing. But one day he asked me, raise your hand if you want to accept the Lord, if you believe that he loves you and you want to get closer to him. And that day I did, and I raised my hand. I just started tearing up, and they prayed over me. And about a few weeks after that, we had a baptism on that Sunday. So I was like, okay, sign me up for that. So I got baptized, I haven't got my certificate. He still has it. He's very, very forgetful sometimes, but very loving guy. And after that, I decided that I'm just going to do my best to get closer to God and just spread his love. I'm a youth leader at my church, part of the audio-visual team. And now there's so much to do. Wednesdays I do a pizza club now, and with our youth group on the same day, so it's just Wednesdays, that's the day. And that's it.
Praise the Lord, Alex. That's a great testimony. It's a great testimony to this church and its influence in the community. And of course, I know, some of the other students that have gone through generations from this church, and their testimonies of coming to the Lord as high school young people. Jacob, and then also Brian later, and his wife. And so there's been a great influence in this area, and it's amazing. It's wonderful. That's an example of an invitational approach right there. But there was also a relationship with someone he knew at school. See? So it's really important to build relationships. Okay, I need to give you all the information for next week. All right? And I need to check your journals, so just leave them out on your table there so that I can even check them while my husband starts the next class. All right, and I'm sorry that we've gone all over just a little bit. Not really, but so next week, if anyone can meet sooner, like at 5, that would be great. If you can't, then 5:30. We're going to meet at the mall. We're not going to meet here. We're going to meet at the mall, and Dr. Cook will be there too. And we're going to send you in different directions. And we're going to go 2 by 2. So we've got 4 guys. So we'll have 2 teams there. So if the brothers want to go together and you 2 want to go together, that's fine. Or if you want to mix it up, either way. And then the gals, you're already a ready-made team here. Okay. What you're going to do is, so many laws now are passed where we can't just solicit people, stand outside stores at the mall and give out tracts or talk to people or anything like that. We can't do that, okay? So this is one thing I came up with just to help us do an outreach project. I'd like for you to bring money to be able to go out to eat. If you don't have money, then borrow it from somebody. Borrow it from your grandparents or somebody. And each of you will choose a restaurant right there at the mall. I don't want us to be scattered way down to Salida somewhere, or, way up on Briggsmore, so that we gotta, we're limited by time, is what I'm telling you. Okay, so there's several restaurants there. I would prefer that you don't end up at the same restaurant. So I'd like for you to work that out before that night, because there's a restaurant like Chipotle won't work. It has to be a sit-down restaurant. Okay? All right. It has to be a sit-down restaurant where you have a waiter or a waitress. And so what you're going to do is not harass the waiter or waitress, not cause them to lose their job or get you kicked out of the restaurant. Okay? And so you're just going to go there and order something to eat, and be sure and give a good tip. We don't want to leave a bad witness because we don't give a good tip. All right? And you just order what you can afford, and you either have them split the check, which sometimes they won't do. So you need to have cash on you in case you have to pay, both of you have to give towards the one check, whatever you ordered, and your tip. And pray before you go. Be praying all week. Remember the scriptures that we've gone over, and pray over those scriptures. And pray them into your heart, and pray for the Lord to connect you with the right person. You've got a whole week to pray ahead of time. And sometimes we've had some remarkable stories from this, because we come back together afterwards. That's why I'm telling you the time's limited. After it's over, we come back together. I'll tell you where we're going to come back together and meet, and then we're going to share what our experience was with each other. Briefly share it, okay? Some of the people have been able to just share some encouragement with a waiter or waitress. They find out about, you just begin to build a relationship first, and go by the leading of the Lord. And hopefully not one person will just take the total lead. But if one of you is really struggling with, you're needing to learn from somebody else, then by all means let the other person take the lead. That's fine. But because this is a learning experience. But be concerned about that person, and how can I best encourage them, or pray with them about something, or ask them if there's anything that I can pray with them for them or their family. If at least you can get that far. I remember one time when we did this as an outreach, and this particular incident happened to be in Elk Grove when we had classes up there. And so my husband and I went to Macaroni Grill that night, and while my students were going other places there, and then we were going to meet together. And so I just, was doing the same outreach project as well. And our little waitress that we had, because we were there a little bit early before as it gets later, the restaurant gets really full. And so she was really busy and had several tables there at the beginning before somebody else came. So I didn't have a chance to, she would zip there and what got our drinks and be off, and then bring them back and be gone. And she would just zip, 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 And I'm thinking, oh Lord, I want a chance to, speak to this girl. Well, at the very end, when she brought us our check, after we'd given her the credit card or the money, and she went back and came back at the very end, and other people were on the floor then, and I guess she probably felt more relaxed, and she looked like a student to me, like a college student. And I said, are you in school? And she said yes, and she said she was there at the junior college there. And I said, well, what's your major? And so that was the way that we started talking to her, and then she began to tell us, and what are your plans for the future, and and so it was great. It was just wonderful, and we were able to talk with her. And then I said, yeah, we have students too. We teach college students. And she said, oh, where, what? And so then we told her, and she said, oh, that's fantastic, she said. And then come to find out, she'd grown up in church. And I said, well, is there anything we can pray with you about? She said, you know what? We just found out today that my grandma has whatever kind of cancer, and they don't give her any hope. And she said, would you pray with me for my grandmother. And I said, what's her name? And we got her name. We didn't pray right then. And because I didn't want her to lose her job there or, whatever. You got to be concerned about these people. And and then I took it to the class and we started praying for her grandmother. I never saw this waitress again. But I'm telling you, there are God moments, and you do what you can do. And we have all kinds of stories of different ways that God works this out. Okay? And don't be in a big rush to try to, right, exactly. Just follow the leading of the Spirit, relax, and say, Lord, lead me in this and help me. Give me an opportunity to at least plant some kind of seed or give a word of encouragement or something, or ask if I can pray with them. Okay. So is everybody clear on that? Because you're going to be graded on it, and I'm going to listen to your results when we get back together. Okay? And you guys will be surprised. It's going to be really, you will be amazed at how God uses you and how this turns out. I want you to be comfortable with, this, because a lot of times we have a lot of this stuff in our heart. We love people and we pray for them, but we don't actually do anything about it. We don't know how, or we're hesitant or whatever. And so this is to help us break that barrier. Okay, so we will meet at, anybody want to start at 5? Anybody can start at 5. You're welcome to do that. But if you can't, then it has to be 5:30 because we have to meet. I want us, our meeting time, we're going to hit, try for 6:45 to meet back together.
In here.
No, at the mall. We'll be right there. Yeah, I want to give you the meeting place at the mall. I'm trying to think. Why don't we meet right there outside of Starbucks? But if it's cold, we'll be right inside the door. We won't be inside Starbucks, not inside. But if it's cold, you can go right inside the mall doors between Carl's Jr. and Starbucks. You know what I mean? Starbucks is there down from Penny's. Between Penny's and Forever 21. By Johnny Carino's.
Inside the mall, in Starbucks.
Well, no. Starbucks has an outside entrance. But I want us to meet outside Starbucks. They've got tables outside there.
Yeah,
unless it's cold, just go inside the mall, not inside Starbucks. Go right inside the mall doors right there in the lobby of the mall.
Do you want to give us your phone number?
Yes, I do. I want to give you my phone number, but don't give this number out. Okay. 209. Alex, you taking down my phone number? Okay, 209 324 5023. 324 5023. Also, get each other's phone number. Whoever your partner is, get their cell phone number. You have to be able to connect this week. You choose if you want to go to Johnny Carino's, Mimi's, BJ's. It's real out in there. Buffalo Wild Wings. There's Uno's right across the street from Mimi's, which is okay. That one is because it's right there, So, or Sizzler. Okay, those are your choices. Those are your choices right there. Okay, and you guys, you decide on your own which one you want to go to, and so that's your assignment. And those of you who are watching online, you get the assignment. And
your phone number's online.
Well, it's only to one person. That's right.
Okay.
I should have blocked that out. We need to.
We're gonna change the number.
I'm changing my number this week. Okay. Yeah, we'll have to do something about that later. I know there's only one person that'll watch this, and we know her really well. So Courtney, she's probably laughing. She'll be laughing when she sees this. Okay. I was going to look up Bill Hybels' finishing conversation in that book, which I will do as my husband comes, because we're running out of time. But anyway, any questions on this? Any questions? That is your final. Okay, you will have to, we have to come back together to report on this, and that will be your grade for your final. I'm going to look at your journals tonight, and just leave them out there. And so thank you all so much. Have you enjoyed the books and the both of the different perspectives here? And okay, wonderful. Thank you.